right, so next speaker here is Craig Drinkhall, who's going to be sharing about benefiting from the paradigm shift to Agile, Assured, and Orchestrated Services. Craig was appointed the CTO at Lumos Networks in January 2014, and prior to joining Lumos, he was an independent consultant specializing in business development, product development, and marketing strategy. He also served as a senior VP of marketing for product development and engineering at Telco, which is where I met Craig. And that was prior to its being acquired by Level 3. So just want to say a warm welcome to Craig and looking forward to hearing your perspective.
Good morning, everyone. I was asked today to talk a little bit about some interesting applications and real-life experiences that we have encountered in Agile and Orchestrated Services from a service provider perspective. What Lumos Network is we are a fiber-based data communications, mostly an Ethernet service provider in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States, serving primarily two or three states, Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And we're just at that right size where we have a lot of demanding customers in our region, whether they're enterprise businesses or carriers, but also they're asking us to do some things that larger companies can't do so that we don't have to worry about a nationwide or a worldwide deployment. So today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of these application examples. I have some enterprise examples as well as some carrier-to-carrier examples, and one of them specifically to talk about is cloud and virtualization. As a service provider, I was asked to share a little bit about what does it mean to us and how hard it is for us to actually provide this service. And as a buyer of these, I have some advice for things for you maybe to watch. On the enterprise side, even though there's a lot of cloud virtualization moving on, still a lot of customers are oriented like this diagram shows, where you have a centralized data center or maybe a couple centralized data centers, and then you have distributed users and computing, but there's still a lot of holding on to the centralized model for whatever reason, whether it be security or whether you can provide the highest level of service. So the things that you provide in this static looking environment, such as virtual firewalls, spam filters, load balancing, mobile management, instead of deploying them as single devices now, what people are asking more for is, how do I move this out without having to deploy another server, another bunch of cables, drive someone to that remote location? Clearly, dynamic bandwidth is still one of the hottest things that happens in the network today. So instead of the old days where a business would have to ask a carrier, give me the biggest pipe possible to every location that I need it so that I can burst when I need to, they're asking the service providers, can we have the bandwidth as we need it? Because it's not always such a static environment, especially if you do something like move an application from one location to another. And one of the most common that we hear from is, what happens if we have a business continuity or a disaster recovery event and we need to move an application or all of the application to the other end of the state or the other end of the country to come up again? Well, how do I redeploy the network and repurpose it and point it to that new location? In the old model, you'd buy another network and it would go to that other location. Now they're asking to have the network be able to move when it moves, and it doesn't always happen, all of the applications at once. So to make that work, they're asking us, can we have customer to service provider APIs, where their computers are talking to our computers and making these things happen that used to happen with calling a person and having them configure or hard cable something. This is very new to service providers. The same thing happens on carrier to carrier. They're asking for dynamic bandwidth. We sell a lot of services in the fiber carrier backhaul to the tower for mobile devices. It's the largest exploding sort of generational event happening is how do you get enough bandwidth to the tower to support the mobile devices? So even something as simple as dynamic bandwidth for an event like a Monday night football game, or you have an event like the iOS 5 download was one of the biggest events we saw on our network that asked for applications. It's not always, again, they don't want to have the maximum bandwidth available at any one location. They want to be able to move these services around. On the horizon is something called VoLTE, or voice over LTE, which the service providers will implement to make the most efficient use of their network. And what they've told us is that that's going to change the paradigm model from a mobile switching center out to the towers in a hub configuration to more of a peer-to-peer configuration. So now managing things like service levels, where you used to say how fast and what's the latency to a tower from the service center, now has to be from any tower to any tower, because it can make a call to any one of those locations. So the service providers like us have to be able to come up with dynamic ways to make the network be able to react to those new features that wireless service carriers want. As a service provider, this actually has an advantage for us, is that we should be able to get better capital efficiency. We should be able to put in less intelligent devices at customer prems and move more intelligence into the network so that you can provide these new services more rapidly and more capital efficiency. But of course, that adds to the complexity as well. And again, carriers are asking, can we have a carrier-to-carrier interface with an API as well? So as any carrier knows, you may have 5, 10, 20 other service provider partners. You don't want to have to call each one and say, hey, look, give me this new feature. You want to have their computers talking to our computers. So it's certainly adding some complexity into the environment. One of the ones that's we think is very interesting is the cloud and virtualized data center. SDN and NFV has become very mature within a data center. So for example, a department can say, I want to have a new server instance because I dreamt up a new application last night, and within a couple clicks of a mouse, they can have a whole virtual presence of a computer server up and running with all the applications they want on it, and be up, boom, boom. And then they can move that application across the data center floor. So it's a very mature technology within the data center, but as soon as you move to another data center, you go back to almost the Stone Ages, where you have big dumb pipes between the two data centers so you can move the data. So many of our customers have said, how can we have these networks react to the movement of the data and the application to that other data center, as well as now all the users need to be repointed to that other location with all the class of services and differences that go with them. So in many cases, the service provider like Lumos Networks partners with a data center company like Iron Mountain and one of their virtualized partners to let the virtualization computers in the data center talk to the service provider network, and again, move those services with all the functionality that would need to go with them. What's required as a service provider? It's not just, can you hook this up and make it work? If you can't price it, order it, provision it, maintain and bill it, it's not something that I can really provide to my customers. And one of the most important things on maintaining it is that you need to know what the configuration is right now at this moment in time. And telephone companies and service providers have been historically more of a static company, where you would say, here's exactly what's in the network, I can see the cables, or here's exactly the configuration. It's in a database today, but it might take 30 days to change that to meet a customer's requirement. Well, as customers are asking for instantaneous response and service levels, you need to know what's happening in the network right now at this instance. So that's one of the most important things that's happening to the service providers, is they need to change their models from static models to dynamic models by having the billing and provisioning systems reach right into the network inventory. And a difficult choice for service providers is, do I let the business systems run the network, which is very scary for the network operators, or do I let the network systems run the business systems, which is very scary for all the compliance and financial people. So again, computer-to-computer APIs and application programming interfaces is again really very important in this environment. So a couple things we advise people to look out for when you're considering using partnering with a service provider is security. Things that used to be very secure in the old world, a real cable, a real system, or at least a real static configuration, now can be dynamically changed. And you need to have as much security as you have in any computing environment. A very often hidden gotcha is that when you're working with somebody who wants to be in this dynamic environment, they'll say, well, you must buy some really big dumb pipe into the highway so that we can have as much as we might need for you to get anywhere. And if you're working with a national service provider, they'll share with you how great their national and international cloud infrastructure is, but oh, you must go buy a big dumb pipe at every one of those locations. So there can be hidden costs. And we already talked too about the service provider network complexity. The service providers like us will be challenged enough to make our infrastructure work correctly, but then this connectivity with other carriers and with enterprise companies is really going to add to the complexity. So you'll have computers talking to computers within your customers, the carriers' computers will be talking to each other, the enterprise and business users' computers will be talking to the carriers' computers, and there may not be any human involvement anywhere to make something happen. So what could possibly go wrong? I often think of the movie Terminator with Skynet. That's pretty much how Skynet started, right? They let all the computers talk to each other. They became self-aware, and they did things too, like downloaded stupid videos on YouTube or something. But I'm guessing that's what they might do. But so again, there are some exciting applications for enterprise and businesses with SDN and NFV. The carriers do need to do some work to get up to speed to be ready to go. Things to look for certainly are network complexity and security concerns, but don't let any of that scare you. I think many service providers are up to the tasks, and if we want to continue to get our business from the sophisticated customers, we'll need to move along as well. So I hope you enjoyed some of the examples that we shared, and I think we left a couple minutes for a few questions.
Thank you, Craig. So I did want to ask you some questions. You come at this from the perspective of a regional service provider. And you know, I go back to that slide that you had, is what is required. I'm just kind of curious, what, you know, you have to look at all these different things like product life cycles, you know, certification of services, APIs and all that. How do you make those decisions in terms of prioritizing the investments? You know, what's most important that, from your point of view? Is it attacking the OpEx issue? What's the primary?
Sure. As a service provider, we do what any business should do. We talk to our customers first and find out from them what's the most important, and then we work on the back ends of cost savings and how hard it is to do. We always call that's the cost to be in the game. So we try to be led by the things that the customers are most asking us for. So for the example that I share with these wireless service providers wanting to go from hub and spoke to peer-to-peer, that's high on their list. So that will be high on our list. And to the extent that we can save money, that's really just our own internal business operations. We try not to make our customers worry about that.
And you mentioned the SDN and NFV there. You know, we have, you know, a couple of dozen, I mentioned this earlier, a couple of dozen companies that are kind of driving a lot of the trials and demonstrations and things like that around the world. Where do you sit in terms of thinking about leveraging these newer technologies? Are you primarily interested in orchestration, dealing with helping you with the OSS system, or are you actually looking at SDN and NFV in addition to that?
Sure. We have two big initiatives going on. We have an initiative to replace our network devices with more intelligent network devices so that they're capable and ready to go as these new services come up about it. And we're also spending a lot of time in the middleware OSS area to be able to answer these questions about who makes the decision about which system touches which device, so that when we get this input and feedback from our customers, we're ready to go.
So the more intelligent devices, that would be something like a zero-touch provisioning platform with OAM features?
It's a combination of the device that's actually sitting in the network, as it can accept that intelligent orchestration, and then getting the middleware to do the orchestration. Both of those together. And
then you mentioned Iron Mountain. You know, if I think about, you know, their role obviously being a data center, how do you see this convergence of the WAN and the data center going forward in enabling a much more dynamic cloud environment? What are some of the key things that we should look for?
First of all, the cloud environment used to be an all or nothing. The old days, they called it outsourcing. You would outsource your computing environment all to one vendor. Now you go with best of breed. So you could pick Salesforce.com at the high application level, or you can use somebody for an infrastructure as a service. So I think you'll see enterprises and companies want to be able to distribute this out. There won't be one answer. So as a service provider, you need to be able to provide this orchestration across many data centers. And we have over 100 data centers in the footprint of just our seven state company. Of course, this part of the country has got the highest concentration of data centers anyway. So we're working on trying to connect to everybody so that we can be ready to go for our customers.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Craig.
You're welcome.